find the answers to life after death. And what do we do with the answers when we actually find them?
Real Paranormal Television.
With your host, Grayson Schmidt.
I've been an investigator and researcher of the paranormal for over 25 years, and I've been able to investigate some amazing places. Hey brother, what do you think of this place? You know it. That's how we roll. We seek out the answers and get behind the scenes of real paranormal investigations. From orbs to Ouija boards, we'll be discussing the hot topics of the paranormal world. To try to find out the truth. To explore why we are here. And where do we go when we die? Is this all, or do we move on to something else? Just what exactly lies beyond this thin veil of life?
Real Paranormal Television.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Real Paranormal Television. I really appreciate the overwhelming support that I've received for this project. Now, you have to understand, I'm doing this project for you, my friends and my peers in the paranormal community who work tirelessly to bring credible evidence to their clients, to the sites that they work with, and to try to help people resolve their paranormal problems. That means the world. And let me tell you, if you guys are out there doing the hard work, and you guys are out there trying to do your best to mull through hours and hours of evidence that you capture in order to come up with some answers for people, it really matters. That really actually benefits somebody and may alleviate their fears about what's actually taking place within their environment. Last episode, I went over a little bit about how I got started in the paranormal field, a little bit about my first experience, and a little bit about how the first investigation took place and the investigation methods that we learned through the course of that investigation. Now, a lot of you start out and have seen some of the shows on TV or have worked with groups or other investigators that have experience, and that actually helps you to get a better foot into things. But if you're starting out from scratch when there was no other, parameter to set your investigation methods from, it was really all a matter of experimentation. Now, you have to understand that throughout the years, there's been all sorts of levels of paranormal claims, of paranormal types of investigations, of divining of spirits, and all other methods to try to communicate with the other side. This has been happening from ancient times. So in modern times, we're bringing a new twist to that, and that's technology. This is something that wasn't available to our predecessors. There was some level of technology, but a lot of people don't take into account the amazing, amazing human barometer. That's you. That's the investigator. That's your knowledge and your insight and your intuition that you bring to an investigation. Now, it doesn't matter if you roll in with $30,000 worth of equipment on an investigation. If you don't know how to use that equipment properly, you might as well have brought nothing. Now, anybody can walk around and take pictures and claim they're a photographer. Anybody can walk around with a recorder and a camera and claim to be a paranormal investigator. But are you really applying the hard science to your investigations? Are you discriminating your evidence capture from data capture, from real-world situations, from real-world information? When we investigate sites, there's a third dimension to the investigation. A lot of people don't take this into consideration. But you can't just do your investigations on one dimension, and you certainly can't do it in two dimension. Three-dimensional investigating is really the ticket to coming up with the correct answers to the problems that your client's experiencing. Now, what do I mean by three-dimensional investigating? Basically, it's not just walking in the door to a site or your client's business or home and walking around with a vector-based meter and a recorder snapping some shots, trying to listen for hours and hours for something to go bump in the night. Basically, you have to take a lot more into consideration. You have to take into consideration the topography, the geology, the location, the height above sea level, the environmental conditions, the age of the structure, the history of the land. It goes on and on and on. And the more that you apply these layers of investigation techniques to your investigations, the better your results are going to be, and the more credibility you can bring to your team. Now, it's very important to bring credibility to your team because there's a lot of disreputable people out there in this field. Now, I'm not going to point out anybody in particular because that's not the kind of person I am. But what I'm going to do is help you set the bar higher so that you can be compared to the best of the best in the field. Now, that's what matters. It's not that you're out there trying to gain some sort of recognition or fame for what you're doing in our community. It basically matters when it all boils down to the fact that you are convincing someone that they are or are not experiencing something paranormal. Now, it's not a matter of convincing based on opinion. It's a matter of convincing based on the data gathered at the location. And basically, if you're collecting the data in a correct manner, then you can really dissimulate and break down for that client how and exactly why they're experiencing either something paranormal or something completely real world. Now, that's what sets a good investigator apart from just an experienced chaser. Now, taking nothing away from people that are freaking fascinated by what we do. I think it's fascinating myself. I'm amazed by some of the evidence that I see out there. But there's a lot of hokery. Now, I might have just made up a new word with hokery, but I like it and I'm going to stick to it. So basically, you have to understand, there's a lot of things that I see on the web. A lot of people send me photos and video and things to take a look at to see what my opinion is on it. And you know what? I really appreciate that. That means I have some level of reputability in this field. And people care about my opinion. I value that probably more than anything. Because you know what? That shows that I'm out there doing the right thing and people recognize that. So instead of being, oh, I'm going to pat myself on the back for that, I'm going to work even harder to try to bring more credibility to this field. This is something I really hope to do with this program. Real paranormal television is a concept that basically evolved of its own. I didn't seek to do a show about the paranormal. Basically, again, just like my first investigation, the show sought me out. A lot of people were always asking me, why don't you put a show together? Why don't you do something, to put out what you found in the field? I'm not really interested in comparing my evidence to other teams' evidence or investigator to investigator. I'm not competitive like that, and I really have no ego to stroke in this field. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me if I have great evidence or somebody else has great evidence. Can we eventually or ultimately help the client or the people that we're working with? Can we help the site that we're working with? Can we set children's mind at ease so they can sleep better at night once we've walked out the door? That's what really matters. And I want you guys to do all that you can to keep it real out there in the field, because that's going to matter to the people that you're working with. And also, it's going to show to the other investigating teams that, you know what, it's worth taking that extra step. It's worth going the extra mile for your client or customer. A lot of you are already doing that, and that's why I do this program. Because what I want to do is recognize the people that I work with in this field that I believe bring a level of credibility to this field, who are investigators that work tirelessly in researching locations, in applying proper investigative methods to an investigation of a site or a location. That's what matters. Now, it also, again, it doesn't matter how much equipment you bring to an investigation. It's how can you use that equipment effectively in order to yield results in your data capture. And everything really, I mean, the term evidence is thrown around very loosely. Evidence is basically what the end result of your data scrutiny has come to. You go to a site, you collect data for hours and hours and hours, maybe days, maybe weeks. Some of you are doing it for months, and I'm proud to say that some of you have been doing it for years. Now, it's amazing when you get a location that you can actually spend a long time at and do what I call a study. Because I don't think any team can walk into an environment within 4 hours and tell if it's haunted or not. If you can, wow, that's amazing. I would like to see you on the show to explain how you do it. Because other people would need to know how anyone could walk into a location in 4 hours and really legitimately go to that client or customer or location and say, yep, you have a haunting legitimately. And I'm not talking about just an EVP capture, because EVP is very common. And we'll be discussing that more in detail later and how to do proper EVP capture. A lot of groups are out there with recorders, digital equipment, but they have no control. They have no alternate method to find out and recognize whether or not that data capture or electronic phenomenon is in the real world or is an electronic phenomenon. Now, what's said is that a true electronic phenomenon could be captured without a microphone. So you could almost go into any location with any digital recording medium and capture EVP if it's true. Now, what's amazing is if you can also create a data log or a log of the concurrence between that EVP capture and an actual EMF burst. There's a lot of teams that are starting to get this type of evidence gathered, and I'm very proud of you for that. That matters, because what we're doing is we're actually figuring out what's taking place when somebody's having a paranormal experience. And that we can use to help better the field, to help set the bar higher for other investigators, and to also help people understand what exactly we're dealing with. Because obviously, once we die, our consciousness, our spirit, our essence, our energy has to go somewhere. It just doesn't taper off into nothingness. Energy can't be created or destroyed, and that's one of the first laws of thermodynamics. But thermodynamics also plays a very important role in paranormal investigation. This we'll also be discussing in the future. In this episode, we're going to focus on a couple of interviews that I conducted recently. One was with a good friend of mine, Claudia Emery, who I've worked with for years in the paranormal community. I find her information phenomenal. I want to share that with you. During the interview, we delve into philosophy, into history, into religion, into work and how that pertains to investigation, and into really getting to know the person on the personal level.
Years ago, I was here investigating with a group, and I was standing on this spot with my friend Claudia Emery. She and I were having an incredible discussion about whether or not the Big Bang Theory was true or not. I wonder, did this couple behind me argue all the time? And were we picking up on their energy?
This is Claudia Emery, and you are watching Real Paranormal Television.
I'm here with Claudia Emery for Real Paranormal Television, and Claudia and I have been friends for a long time. We've investigated together, we've worked together on teams, and she's got an amazing story to tell, so we're going to ask some questions and see if we can get some really cool answers, which I'm sure. So Claudia, what place do you feel that your religious background or your religious study have being an investigator into the paranormal?
Well, to tell you the truth, I've been a paranormal investigator in spite of my religion, not because of it. The Roman Catholic faith believes in life after death, that your soul lives on once your body has ceased to exist, and it goes before the pearly gates to be judged, and you either go to heaven or you go to hell. There used to be a place called purgatory at one time, but that seems to have gone by the wayside. But you either go to heaven or you go to hell. Your soul does, once your body has died. They do not believe that souls remain on this earth. In fact, most Orthodox Christians believe that we are not communicating with spirits or of people, we're communicating with the devil or demonics that are taking the form of individuals and pretending that they are human.
So Claudia, tell me why you became a nun.
I became a nun because I thought I had a vocation, and what led me to that was I was always a spiritual person, even as a child. I grew up in an Italian, very Roman Catholic household, and I went to school from first grade to 12th grade, surrounded by nuns who really had you instilled with religious beliefs and religious practices all the time. We did things with them after school, things like with sodality and Casa del Carmen, and to the point where I chose an order that if I was going to enter, that was the order I wanted to go into, and they required psychological testing for 3 days. And to me, I thought, well, if I'm not meant to be a nun, then they're going to tell me.
Right.
So they basically told me I passed. I was one of 6 out of 50 that actually passed. So I went in. I spent about 3 years in the order. First year postulant, second year I was a canonical novice, and third year I was a second year novice, and I spent time in Brooklyn, New York, teaching at one of the schools and living in with professed sisters. It took 7 years to become a professed nun in this particular order, and my order, we took 4 vows. Most religious orders took 3, poverty, chastity, and obedience. And this particular order, we also took apostolic works. We were also a teaching order, so we had to have a college education as well as religious background and religious training in scripture, theology, epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy, all that stuff. We studied all those things, including the area we wanted to teach, like biology or mathematics or whatever we wanted to teach there, as well as we had to learn the religious part. And at some point, I realized I did not have a vocation, and I left the order.
Why did you leave? What was the reason behind you leaving?
Well, I was 2 things. I was having a crisis of faith. I had studied a lot of theology and scripture, and I found out that a lot of the things that I believed in and was taught as a child were stories. And I was having a crisis of faith as a result of it. For example, if I can give you an example, Mary Magdalene was told to me when I was growing up that she was a prostitute, and I found out that she was probably one of the greatest disciples that Jesus had. In fact, she probably led them after he died and was crucified. The other thing, besides the crisis of faith, was I was living with a bunch of professed nuns in Brooklyn at the time that were going through their own thing about wanting to leave and staying in community. And these were professed women that were professed religious. And I had a thing where if the parent didn't come to the PTA meeting, I went to the parent. And every Wednesday night I had this Italian nun come with me because most of the parents spoke Italian and they didn't speak English. She was my translator. And I got to see the people on the outside versus people on the inside who were more religious than these people who were professing to be religious. And it just blew me away. And I just felt that if I wanted to be spiritual, I could be spiritual in the world. I didn't have to be in a convent. I think that the Bible is more allegorical, and these things are told to us in terms of a lessons learned kind of thing, or to mean something. They're symbols. They're symbols of what we can be versus what we are, where we should be versus where we are. And it's also, religion was done to control the people. It was done to make everything uniform and everything under their control. For example, I'm reading some books right now about the Gnostics, and it was known that the early church was fragmented. There were many beliefs in Christianity at the time, and the Roman Catholic Church, along with the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, Constantine, they decided that they were going to pick out which books of the Bible people were going to have to read. And they picked out Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they threw out the rest and claimed everybody who was associated with those books heretics, and those books were heretical.
On that note, do you feel that the Book of Thomas is relevant?
Absolutely. Thomas, doubting Thomas, was one of the 12 apostles. He was right there with Christ. If you read his gospel, it's not so much a gospel where it's telling stories, but it's a list of sayings that Jesus told. And what's important about the Gnostics is that, and especially about Thomas, is that they're trying to tell you not so much what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John said, which was what Jesus said to the masses, but the Gnostics are trying to tell you what Jesus said to the apostles. Okay? And the whole thing about the Gnostics is about knowledge. It's the whole crux of their being. And the knowledge that they seek, there's two forms of knowledge. There's the external knowledge that we can learn through experience and through life, as well as, learning, rotation. And then there's also the internal knowledge, or the gnosis, that we learn, that you can't learn, I should say, that it's already there. It's, what's going on. And it's your knowledge between you and your Creator that you can't express to anybody else. There's no way you can tell them. It's something very personal. So religion doesn't play a part in that, because religion is telling you these are all the things you have to do in order to be a good whatever. And what the Gnostics are saying is that's irrelevant. What's relevant is what's in here, and what your relationship is that you figure out on this earth between you and your Creator. Right, where the devil fits in all of this is, you have, like St. Thomas Aquinas said, you have good and you have evil. You can't have good without evil, just like you can't have light without darkness. And when God created supposedly Satan, he was given all the archangel abilities and decided to reject it. There's a lot of theory or a lot of themes regarding rejection, becoming a traitor, Judas, Satan, and rejecting God, basically. And to me, I think that is the one evil we can have in this world, is the fact that we can reject goodness. That, to me, is the greatest evil. But it's, in terms of demonics and what's going on, about infestations or manifestations of evil spirits, I don't think they exist.
So regarding demonic energy, or what's alleged demonic energy, do you feel that, as in life, so in death? If a person's ruthless in life, do you think that their spirit would carry on as well, being ruthless until it finds peace?
Absolutely. About at the Kaufman House, where I experienced physical manifestation where something grabbed the wire from my earpiece and pulled my earpiece out of my head, smacking my face, and pulling my recorder out of my pocket. I had no idea what was going on, and what was screamed to me by the person standing there was, "Claudia's been attacked, we have to leave." and I was escorted out of the building. We should have stayed there at that point. I mean, I did not feel attacked, number one. I felt if it could have that kind of energy, it could have, and it wanted to hurt me, it could have, and it didn't. It chose just to get my attention, okay? That's all it was trying to do. I did not feel in any way that this was an evil thing. I felt it was trying to get my attention.
Let's say we were dealing with something that's demonic. Do you feel any sort of non-human presence could be misrepresented as a demon? Do you feel that a person, a ruthless person in life is now a ruthless spirit in death? Or do you think we're dealing with ultra-terrestrials, beings that can actually traverse time and space?
Wow. I don't know about extraterrestrials. Ultra-terrestrials. It could be those that bleed from one dimension into another. I mean, there's been theories about that, and in string theory, there's also the possibility that it is a really bad spirit energy that has gone on beyond into the spirit world and is still bad energy. Is it a demonic? I don't know. I mean, people talk about demonics, and I don't really believe in them. I don't believe there's a devil. I believe it's, like I said, allegorical. I think evil is within us, or it's not. I think we can choose to be evil or not, just like we could choose to be good or not. But in terms of an evil spirit or a devil, no. I don't believe that they exist.
Claudia, can you tell me a little bit about your work experience and maybe what that brings to the table in paranormal investigating? Do you feel that it has any relevance whatsoever?
Well, it's made me a little anal when it comes to technical things.
What do you do exactly?
For 40 years, I've worked for the Department of Defense as a quality assurance specialist and as a technical individual or in the technical field. Prior to that, I was a teacher, and I was a teacher for 6 years. But I went from teaching into quality assurance when I worked for the government. Now, I work for an agency or a part of the Department of Defense that is part of the civilian group. You have all the military branches, but the civilians that are part of this civilian group support the military when they go off to war and fight for our freedom. I belong to a group that actually supplies the military with all manner of supplies. And we make sure that the material, as a quality assurance specialist, we make sure that the material that they receive is in good working order and it's what they expected. Same as when you go out and you buy something, you want it in good working order, you want the biggest bang for your buck, and you want a camera, not a paper clip when you buy a camera. I worked initially on solving problems with deliveries and with material that was being shipped to Vietnam at the time. And I worked on cases, and I learned how to be the subject matter expert for different items of supply so that I could tell what the requirements were and what kind of condition it should be in when it arrived. I think that had a lot to do with how I investigate, because it is an investigation as well. I have to find out what is required, what actually occurred, and where the problem lies, and resolve the issue as well as prevent it from ever happening again. And it's allowed me to go through a methodology, a step-by-step process in investigating. I always try to start out doing the same things at each location. And then there are things that I tailor to the location that are more technically oriented.
What do you think is important to be a good paranormal investigator?
Well, I honestly think that honesty is the most important thing, especially about the evidence, because it's all about the evidence. It doesn't make any sense if you're going to fake it, you know. But first of all, I think that it's important to be honest. Second of all, I think you have to be dedicated. Let's face it. I don't know too many people that would be willing to go into attics that are like sweltering for hours on end, or sit in sub-zero or sub-freezing temperatures for long periods of time and record and talk into nothing. And you really have to be dedicated to what you're doing and to make sure that the evidence is true. You also have to have a little cash put aside, because you have to get the proper equipment. You really just can't flub it, because you can get evidence that is false just simply from the equipment. So it's really important that you buy at least something that's moderate. But like I said, the most important thing is to be honest and dedicated about the evidence.
Through your investigations, do you feel that you have proof that spirits exist?
Well, I have proof that something exists, whether it's spirit or the bleeding of one dimension into another, where these entities are communicating with us or trying to communicate with us. I don't know. That's the whole point. There's so many theories right now about what these EVPs or what these communications are. It's hard to say. Is it a spirit, or is it, like the church says, is it a demonic, in the form of a spirit? Or is it like the scientists say, where there's the interbleeding of universes?
And what's your opinion?
I really don't know. I would like to do more research and get more scientists involved and see the scientific method applied to paranormal investigations. I think it's one way of proving theories. I mean, let's face it, I bet you at any given moment on the face of this earth there's a paranormal investigation going on. There are tons of thousands of paranormal investigators. And is any one of us closer to the truth of life after death, proving it or not? I think not.
Have you found working with other investigators or teams to be more of a positive or more of a negative experience?
Well, it depends upon the team, and it depends upon, I really think, the leader of the team. So much hinges on that person, because they really set the tone for the whole group. We were in a really good group. We had great members, but the leader was lacking, and as a result, the group fell apart. But that happens sometimes. You get the wrong people in charge of a group, and it'll really destroy the group.
Claudia, regarding paranormal investigation, what do you think is the truth? What do you think the ultimate answer is?
Is there life after death? That is the ultimate thing we are seeking. And that's why I think more has to be done in terms of locking down what is and what isn't a theory. What theories we can dismiss and what theories we can carry on. And right now I'm looking to do something more, to go one step further than just paranormal investigations. And where I want to go at this point is to lock down some of those theories.
Do you believe that we as human beings can influence the world of spirits?
Sure. I mean, if spirits are people like us, why shouldn't we influence their world as they are influencing our world? It also, we can enter their world from different realms, in the sense that we've talked about things like this. Most of us that have had paranormal experiences, they've happened during the daytime, and yet when we go out as paranormal investigators, we go out at night. And we talked about having paranormal investigations done during the daytime as well, because if spirits are around, they're around all the time.
Like you and I have gone on to investigate for years together in all sorts of amazing locations. So what do you attribute that to? I mean, is it just that we've carried on a friendship because of our mutual respect, or do you feel it's more, that you and I are on the same path in life?
Maybe a little bit of both, but also I think I respect you as a paranormal investigator. I know your technical expertise. You're bar none, number one. I have nothing but admiration for you as a person as well, and as a friend. But why wouldn't I want to go ghost hunting with you or investigating with you on any investigation?
Thank you, Claudia. You rock.
The second interview I'm going to focus on is with a friend of mine, Officer John Levy. John is not only a paranormal investigator and researcher, he's a Philadelphia police officer and one of Philly's finest. John is also the co-founder of Old City Paranormal, and I do a lot of tech support for his team. I enjoy working with John a lot. His team is phenomenal. I've gathered incredible friendships from working with the team. The people on his team range from believers to skeptics. They range from officers to civilians. And they're amazing people with a passion for the paranormal.
John, I want you to tell me, what was your first encounter with the paranormal?
Well, my first encounter with the paranormal was, matter of fact, I was working as a police officer, and was patrolling in the 26th District, which covers the Fishtown area, Port Richmond, and it just so happens that I was born and raised just on the opposite side, which would have been the 24th District. And summertime, my parents were down the shore, so I went over to the house to we were not use the restroom, and nobody was home, so I actually left the door open. It's kind of funny, but true. So I was going to the bathroom, and out the doorway, which if you would have went further to the left, was my grandfather's room, and to the right would have been the stairwell. So I'm sitting there, and I see this figure shape walk by, which it kind of caught up corner of my eye, and I did a double take, and it was my grandfather. Stature, just how he walked, his whole demeanor. And the funny part about it was later on that night, I talked to my mom, and we're Polish in ethnicity, and I said, I seen Josh. She goes, what are you talking about? I explained to her what happened, and basically she goes, it's funny you say that, because I kind of felt his presence in the property. So that was pretty much my first experience.
How did you become a police officer?
Believe it or not, it was always a dream of mine to become a police officer, and basically you have to take a test purpose and whatnot. So I took the test in 1992. And then I wanted to join the Navy because they said it was a 2-year waiting list. When I came out, I still wasn't hired. I had to take the written test again in 1996. I was hired in 98. From that standpoint, I went to the police academy from 98, from February of 98 to we graduated July 31st. And from that standpoint, I was assigned to the 16th Police District, which is the Drexel University area, University City, where the Philadelphia Zoo is at. And I was out there from 1998 to 2001, where I was transferred to the 26th Police District. from 2001, April 2001 till February of 2012. So I've actually been down here now at Philadelphia Police Headquarters downtown for about a year and a half.
And why did you start a paranormal team?
I started a paranormal team because my own interest in the paranormal with my first experience I had, and again I was with the group in probably 2008, 2007, and out of Delaware County, and kind of felt like things weren't going my way. As you know, I'm a real big innovator. I like doing things. I like coming up with new ideas, different ways of investigating, and I just kind of felt my ideas weren't being utilized. So basically, from that standpoint, I got my partner Steve Rotundi, and from that point, we formed Old City Paranormal.
Can you tell me about Old City Paranormal?
Yeah, Old City Paranormal was originated in December 2009 with myself and Steve Rotundi, and it was kind of, I don't know if I want to say like a family and friends thing, but pretty much Old City Paranormal is, again, I got my wife on there, Amanda Levy, George Feinstein, who's another police officer, works in the mayor's detail, Melissa Seiler works upstairs in the police radio, Jerry Cologne, new Steve, he's actually a tattoo artist. And we're all, we're not just people that we just met off the internet. I mean, we all know each other. We know our backgrounds. We know when we're out investigating, we're not going to fabricate a lot of stuff. Yeah, I mean, we all have faith in each other. We all have trust, and I think that's one of the things that's really big with Old City Paranormal, just a trust factor, and knowing that if I can trust my investigators, if I send them out in the field by themselves, that they're going to be honest.
How does being a police officer help in investigating the paranormal?
I think being a police officer with investigating paranormal, I think it helps me out a lot because I'm not quick to jump to conclusions. I like to look at things thoroughly, investigate thoroughly, and I have a lot of police officers and people who work within the police department help us investigate with the Old City Paranormal. And I just think, again, it just adds to our credibility. I think the techniques we're taught in investigating in law enforcement kind of does coincide, with the paranormal.
John, is there advice that you can give other investigators?
Is there any advice I can give to other investigators? That's a great question. Like they say in sports, don't bull hog. I think more groups should be opened to allow other groups in on not their investigations, but allow them to investigate where they investigated. I mean, everybody likes to lay claim to places they investigated, and how can you do something that is not even your property anyway? I think that has to stop in the paranormal field itself. Like I can talk to somebody I may have met on a social network and, say, hey, where you investigated, and they'll tell me, but they don't want to give you contact information, or they're afraid to tell you things. And I think we have to get away from that. It's been long enough, and I think that a lot of these groups should realize, not that you're going to get something better than they got, but even if you did, or you might get something that they got, and you're only validating, you're strengthening the evidence.
John, a lot of times people go into locations basically against the law, or they're trespassing at these locations in order to investigate. What do you feel about trespassing at locations, and what are some of the consequences for trespassing at locations?
I guess the questions everybody has to ask themselves is it really worth it? So is it really worth the criminal record? Just to go investigate?
What about breaking and entering? Wouldn't that be considered sort of the same thing if you
Yes.
go into a place without consent?
Yes. Breaking and entering, burglary, criminal trespass, all basically falls under the same guidelines. You're going into a place without permission. And, again, that's, if you have any preconceived thoughts of doing something like that, do us all a favor and get out of the business. My group, Old City Paranormal, I mean, we have a liability waiver form, basically, and I think every group, if you don't have it, you should have it. Again, I think there is a lot of loopholes, but at least if you present something to, number one, the place that you're investigating, and number two, if you're starting your team out, all my investigators, number one, have to have some kind of health insurance. God forbid they get hurt, so prior to investigating with Old City Paranormal, I have a waiver statement basically stating that, we're going to investigate in dark places, we're going to investigate outside where the terrain might be uneven. It's dangerous, so I think it's really important that, you have these waiver forms in place to, not only cover yourself, but especially the clients' houses that were, you're investigating at. I mean, they could have expensive equipment in there. You're investigating in the nighttime, and you trip and knock a couple $100, vase over, or you damage some kind of TV, or if you don't have a waiver form in place, get it in place.
Is there a location that sticks out more than others that you've investigated?
Yep, and I think you already know what I'm about to say. By far, Temple Hospital's nursing school. I mean, I've investigated some pretty cool places, but none by far has had the type of evidence and the type of experiences that I've had. I mean, to be touched on my back on a first investigation, only to come back to a second investigation and asking, who this was or what touched me, and actually get a direct response from a previous investigation asking me if it hurt. Out of this world.
Tell us about that. Tell us what happened exactly.
Well, again, the nursing school was a place where, again, when I was in the 26th district, our narcotics team did in surveillance at him. And one of our investigators met the administrator from the school, who was moving all the schools, basically the school was closing and relocating. And, he kind of told her that it was kind of a spooky place, and she said, well, it's haunted. And make a long story short, got me in touch with her, and basically that night we went to where they had said they had seen an apparition, where they were pulling up the files. And I was literally standing up, and the nursing administrator was standing in front of me, no more than 4 to 5 feet. And a couple of my investigators went around the corner, and I heard kind of like somebody came back, or like walking, like they kind of like, and I thought it was one of my investigators. So I'm kind of looking up the hallway, asking, "Hey, is that you guys? And I asked the lady that was with me if she heard that, and she said no. And within a couple of seconds after that, I was kind of like a poke jab right in the small of my back. So it kind of startled me. I kind of like checked back to see maybe if it was something protruding from a wall, light switch. I mean, they had some frames mounted or whatever, but I was approximately about 3.5 feet, maybe 2.5, 3.5 feet from the wall, and startled the heck out of me. And basically, again, after that, and we fast forward to the second investigation, I went to the same spot, and I wanted to know what touched me. And basically, at the end of that investigation, reviewing the evidence, actually, my partner Steve was reviewing the evidence, and he called me on the phone, and he goes, "Dude, do you remember when we were standing in that court and you were asking me questions, and I said, yeah, and he goes, dude, you got to hear what I just heard. So we came over to the house, and sure enough, the EVP was, did it hurt? It didn't sound like that. It sounded nasty, but it was by far the craziest experience I've ever had.
John, if somebody's experiencing the paranormal, what should they look for in a team?
If they're experiencing?
Yeah, like if you have somebody out there in the world that's having paranormal experiences in their house or their business,
Yeah.
and they need help from a team, what should they look for in a team that they can get the best answers for their situation?
I guess references. You know, look for a seasoned team. Don't just be content on the first group you have. I mean, if you want to call them up, ask them questions. I myself, I have a long list of referrals of places I investigate. Not just places I've investigated, fundraising events that I've done. I mean, we've raised thousands of dollars for different locations, and I have any of these people at a drop of a dime that would write me a recommendation up like no other. You know, yeah, don't be content. Don't be content with the first group you find. I think the best evidence you could find with the paranormal is something that after you could look at every avenue of what it could possibly be, and after you have no conclusion as to what that would be, and even going back and trying to recreate it, and again, looking at different avenues, different angles as to whatever it was that you caught, what it could possibly be. I mean, regardless, when you put something up on evidence on the internet or something like that, you're going to have somebody out there that's going to, not per se debunk it, but they're going to basically come up with their own reasoning as to why. So I think if you're going to come up with some good evidence, you need some good solid background as to back up the evidence you got, especially when you're getting, when you have other people out there that are experienced out there that could probably come up with a reasonable explanation without even being there.
What do you think is fake so far as evidence is concerned?
That's a great question because, you know, a lot of these quote-unquote thrill seekers or the people out in the paranormal field that aren't out there for all the right reasons, you know, whether they're good at computers or not or fabricate it, I mean, and that's what's killing this business. The people that aren't in it for the right reasons, and you know, and that's what makes it tough on us because when you put something out there for evidence, you know, you're going to have your people say, oh, that's not true because I seen this on the internet that this guy put something up and, you know, it was 100% fake. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it is, man. You know.
John, how much time does it take to investigate a location?
There's no time limit, in my opinion. I mean, if you're investigating there once and you got stuff flying off the walls, this and that, hey, place is haunted. You know what I mean? But I don't think there's any time frame. I usually like to go twice, just to try to, if we don't get something the first time, if we go back to get something, or if we do get something, try to go back to validate it. But in my eyes, I don't think a case should ever be closed.
Some of the cases that I've worked with Old City Paranormal on have been pretty elaborate. Some of them have been long-term studies of locations. And these locations aren't your regular run-of-the-mill locations. They're entire buildings. And now we're not just talking about a large house or a commercial space. I'm talking about full hospitals. I'm talking about city halls and government establishments. Now, what's amazing about this is that you really have to take the time to study that location, to gather data over the course of time to understand trends that take place at the location. Because data acquisition is one thing. Understanding and uncovering the trends that take place at these locations, especially during paranormal phenomenon, is something completely different. I've done a couple of really cool things with his team, and one of the things on one of the locations is power condition studies. Now what that is taking your electronic understanding or looking for EMF to a completely different level. We're looking at the actual power densities, the directions of incoming frequencies, meaning from radio communication, terrestrial communication, from feeders from the building, from different devices and motors that are taking place in an operation, and also part of the lighting system. Now, a lot of people don't consider how much the lighting in a building can actually affect your EMF readings. Now, you have to understand there's a big difference between incandescent lighting sources and fluorescent lighting sources. Incandescent lights use a filament inside a vacuum, and electricity passes through that filament, and it actually heats that filament up to the point that it becomes light. So just like we talked about on the last episode about a black body source, that filament starts as almost as close to a black body source as you can get. And then through the transfer of electricity and the resistance of the tungsten, which that filament is made of, that filament literally is trying to catch on fire and becomes white hot in the lamp. Now, the bulb itself is a vacuum, and all the air has been sucked out, and an inert gas is put in there that's not a combustible material, such as oxygen. Because if oxygen were put into that lamp, it would burn out. The difference with fluorescent lighting is that fluorescent lighting uses a cathode and an anode in order to create plasma, literally between the 2 points, and fluoresces the gas within that vacuum or that lamp. Now, also what has to happen is there's a ballast, and a ballast is basically like a transformer, but it creates a high output voltage and converts the existing voltage to, and steps it up basically to an even higher voltage. And a lot of times when we're walking through an establishment, a building, a site, a historic location that has fluorescent lighting, we can get errant EMF readings. Now, you'll find that you'll put a vector-based tester or a tri-field tester close to a working fluorescent light, and you'll notice that you'll have an incredible increase in your EMF capture. So what happens is, can you imagine working under fluorescent lighting during the day, and you're exposed to these EMF fields? That can be mutagenic over time. That can cause disruptions in, all sorts of functions of the body, and especially can create depression. It's amazing how EMF actually affects our brain waves. Now I can notice the flicker in fluorescent lights, and it drives me nuts. I'm not a huge fan of fluorescence. But also, they can be very dangerous because inside those tubes is mercury, and that mercury is vaporized when that electricity passes from the cathode to the anode. So what happens is it fluoresces, again, the gas or these bits inside of it, which want to catch fire but don't. It's basically allowing the electricity to pass from one side of the lamp to the other and fluorescing the gas inside. So basically fluorescents are literally bolts of plasma going from one side of the lamp to the other. That's not the coolest part. The coolest part is the fact that there's a transformer with a starter that initiate that reaction and create an incredibly huge EMF field. So please be careful when you're out there investigating. Not only not to break any fluorescent lamps because you don't want to inhale the mercury, but also because these fields can give you readings that would appear to be paranormal, especially if it's intermittent. If the transformer or ballast is failing, then it can give you plus and minus signals all the time. So you really have to be careful and understand your readings that you're getting at the field. Now, another thing is understanding vector-based meters. Now, what I mean by vector-based meters are your standard K2 meter was made as a vector-based meter. It's a very simple EMF meter that people claim to be able to use for contacting or being in touch or helping the paranormal to communicate. There's a bit of conjecture with that. If there are concurrent EMF readings associated with EVP capture, then there's a good possibility that that's what the case is. But normally, that type of meter is reading the flow of electricity through a conductor and the magnetic field that surrounds that flow of electricity through the conductor in one direction. It's not a tri-field meter, which you can then use to understand power density or a three-dimensional shape of the power. Now we'll get into more of that type of thing later.
Real Paranormal Television.
Copy that.